busy news week in store. Former President Jacob Zuma's corruption trial resumes this morning, and this past weekend saw Zandile Gumede being re-elected as the chairperson of the region of eThekwini. So let's get into it with, of course, Tabane, a Power to Truth host, about what he thinks about what's been happening. Good morning to you. Always a pleasure having a conversation with you. So let's reflect back with Zandile Gumede. She re-emerged victorious, beating Tabane. Did you see this coming?
Well, with politics, sometimes you may not predict, but clearly, if you look at the Mpumalanga conference, you can see a pattern emerging of, if you like, a ground swell defiance of the step-aside rule of the ANC. You've seen also last year where Ismail was able to convene gatherings. In fact, one of the gatherings he convened was parallel to the ANC's January 8 statement. So it doesn't seem like that the ground forces, if one can use that term loosely, of the ANC buy into the whole renewal story too much. And that should be a worry, because remember, the eThekwini region is one of the biggest in the country. Of course, it's not the totality of the ANC, but it cannot be ignored. If they so overwhelmingly vote for somebody so clearly accused of corruption, and in KwaZulu-Natal, when we talk about tender corruption, it's not something that's far-fetched. It's not like they're just sort of accusing her loosely, right? But they still go on and vote for her. Overwhelming. It was not a marginal victory. This was a stamp of victory that basically, if one can put it that way, throws the middle finger at the national leadership. That should worry the ANC. That should worry all of us ahead of December. That we should not take for granted the outcomes, because the ground, the branches may just decide otherwise. And I agree with Kolani Dube, as we were speaking to him earlier on, that the joke is on us. To me, the joke is on us that we are just spectators, and we continue to put this kind of people in power who clearly have no idea of what the people are feeling about the sort of things that have been happening, especially corruption over the last couple of years. So a very interesting development, but quite worrying, not just for the ANC people who are focusing on the so-called renewal and so on, but for all of us who are hoping for a new leaf that the ANC can turn at this stage.
And just briefly then, the Zuma trial, of course, commencing today. We know that the foundation came out saying that they're pursuing more of a private prosecution against Billy Downer, also applying for that postponement. What does this mean then? What do you make of all of this?
I'm truly exhausted with Zuma. I just don't have the words. When you think you have seen it all with his delaying tactics, now something else comes up. The whole issue is another delaying tactic. I agree with what the NPA is saying, and I hope that the judges are now going to see through this and say, this far and no further. The trial must get on, and let him prove his innocence in a trial. So far, all we have seen is him trying very hard not to have his day in court. Other cynics are saying he wants to drag this thing straight into the grave. He's turning 80 tomorrow. And he's just sitting there and saying, I'm going to drag it out until I'm gone. That's really the feeling. And he can. If he has dragged it for 17 years, what's stopping him from dragging for another 3 or 4 years? So the more you have all these interlocutory applications, preliminary discussions, trial within trials, we never get into the trial. And I hope the judge today will just say, sorry, we're getting on with it. If the Supreme Court decides otherwise, we will stop at that point, because that could take months. Whereas if the trial can start and actually finish while while his other matters are being considered. So I'm sorry, we all have to at some point subject ourselves to the law. As they say, justice delayed is justice denied. That should apply to Zuma. Absolutely. If his justice has been delayed for so long, that we should now start thinking it's going to be denied.
We'll have to see what Judge Pitkun has to say, but definitely it's almost like a contradiction. He says he wants his day in court, but doing everything, of course, I suppose he can.
But actually he doesn't. He doesn't want his day in court, because remember, the Shabir Sheikh case was a mirror image of this case. In other words, his chances of being found guilty are very high, and he knows this. And that's why it's important for him to, destabilize the prosecution, intimidate the prosecution, remove Downer. Because once he removes Downer, he knows he's removed somebody with a lot of historical knowledge. You have stuck with this case since 2005, So a new person who comes there may even come and say, oh, I need to familiarize myself with the case first, which is another delay. And I just think this is unacceptable, and the court must stop this abuse of our court process.
All right, JJ, we have to leave it there due to time, but you and I could go on and on and on forever. But definitely we have to see what Judge EThekwini has to say about this, and Tulasizwe and Spamandla go get out in Pietermaritzburg for us with those developments. All right.